It's not hard to figure out what Fat Ass 45 is up to at the moment. He's making every effort to stir up racial tension and provoke violence after the shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin. But what's harder is to figure out why he's doing this. Yesterday, Fat Ass 45 traveled to Kenosha over the objections and pleas of the governor and mayor, who are both Democrats, who say he will only make the situation worse, which is probably his goal anyway. Yesterday, he passed up an easy chance to condemn violence on all sides, just as he dared Joe Biden to do, and as Biden had happily done. And basically, Fat Ass 45 defended Kyle Rittenhouse, who was charged with 2 murders in Kenosha last week. He denounced the Black Lives Matter movement, compared Blake's shooting to missing a putt, and turned down a meeting with Blake's family for good measure. He also offered up a pair of bizarre, baseless conspiracy theories during a primetime faux news interview. Perhaps Kenosha will prove a turning point for this campaign, but if it does, it's far more likely to be because it has turned voters against Fat Ass 45 than because it has rallied them to his support. There's an intuitive logic to the idea that protests, rioting, and racial tension will benefit Fat Ass 45's re-election effort. Fat Ass 45 seems to thrive on chaos, and his 2016 election was driven in large part by racial resentment and fear among white voters. Therefore, greening up racial, therefore, gaining up white racial resentment now might be one thing, perhaps the only thing that can save the Fat Ass's foundering campaign. A parade of pundits, generally of the center-right or moderate, the Fat Ass 45 skeptical variety, emerged late last week to demand that Biden denounce violence forcefully, which he had, and has again since, or deliver a sister soldier movement, however misleading that shorthand is, or else risking losing the election. There isn't much up to date polling to go on so far, and the story is still developing. But Fat Ass 45's decision to stoke racial tension early this summer has been the one thing that has managed to shake up an otherwise very stable, fake presidential race. The fake president's impeachment and the ravages of the coronavirus, a vast economic collapse, none of these has done much to change either the dynamics of the Biden Fat Ass 45 race or the fake president's approval rating. The one exception came in June, amid massive nationwide protests that followed the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Rashad Brooks at the hands of police. Fat Ass 45's numbers tumbled, driven by voters, especially white voters, painting his handling of the racial justice and the protest. Between then and Blake's shooting on August 23rd, the protests have simmered down nationwide, and the gap between Biden and Fat Ass 45 has narrowed from more than 10 points to about 6, right about where it was at the end of May. Per Real Clear Politics average, what happened? The country's racial division receded somewhat from focus, sharing the spotlight with other stories, and Fat Ass 45 avoided the topic altogether. The fact is that voters don't like the way the fake president talks about race, and the moments when his disapproval spikes are often those when he is stoking racial division, such as in June or after the violent white supremacist march in Charlottesville, Virginia back in 2017. Yet Fat Ass 45 is now determinedly forcing the national conversation back to the topic on which he fares worse. His words the past 2 days show why it tends to backfire. Even Americans who might be rattled by the prospect of writing, and therefore susceptible to a more disciplined, if no less practically racist, argument from Fat Ass 45, reacts poorly to the things he actually says when he tries to seize the moment of political opportunity. The fake president has declined to even speak to Jacob Blake's name. While Biden has already spoken with Blake's family, Fat Ass 45 was slow to set up a conversation and then pulled out when the family requested that a lawyer listen in on the call during an interview with Faux News last night. Fat Ass 45 compared an officer shooting Blake 7 times in the back, paralyzing him, to bad luck on the links. There's a whole big thing here. But they choked just like in a golf tournament. They missed a 3-foot putt. Even the psychofanatic, lower ignorant ham was taken aback. You're not comparing to golf because, of course, that's what the media would say, she interjected, but of course that was precisely what he was doing. Elsewhere in the same interview, Fat Ass 45 insisted that Biden was being controlled by people you've never heard of, and that they're in dark shadows. Once again, ignorant ham tried to save him from himself. What the fuck does that even mean? That sounds like a conspiracy theory. He also made a bizarre claim about thugs that matches an old false Facebook rumor. Compare this with the way that the Fat Ass 45 has handled the case of the white supremacists who were in house. The white 17-year-old charged with shooting 2 people in Kenosha a week ago. Earlier today, the White House press secretary tried to avoid the issue, telling reporters that the fake president wasn't weighing in on it. But then Fat Ass 45 spoke later today, and not only did he Not only didn't condemn Rittenhouse's actions, but he defended the white supremacists. He was trying to get away from them. No, he was shooting at them. That's totally different than trying to get away from them. It looks like that's what Fat Ass 45 said. I guess he was in very big trouble. He probably would have been killed. The gulf between the gulf between Fat Ass 45's indulgent view of the white supremacist Rittenhouse and his swiftness in defending police prerogatives in the Blake case is enormous and easy to interpret. Partly because he loves to stir up racial tension for political gain, and partly because he has taken a long, dim view of the black people, especially in legal matters, and partly he cannot bring himself to criticize anyone who has been friendly to him, whether it's Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, or the white supremacist Rittenhouse inbred supporter of his. This causes Fat Ass 45's endless problems. His campaign dared Biden to denounce violence, and though Biden had already done so, he did it once more in a speech yesterday. Looting is not protesting, Biden said in Pittsburgh. Setting fires is not protesting. None of this is protesting. It's lawlessness, plain and simple, and those who do it should be prosecuted. Violence would not bring change; would only bring destruction. Biden also took the opportunity to throw the challenge back to Trump, the Fat Ass 45 Trump anyway, and asked him to condemn violence. This should have been a softball, but instead Fat Ass 45 took the strike looking, declining the easy swing. He refused to even acknowledge any violence by people aligned with him. Americans aren't fucking blind, and they're not fucking stupid. They can see the violence. They can see that Fat Ass 45 won't condemn it, and they can see that Biden has. As the former vice president said today, ask yourself, do I look like a socialist with a soft spot for writers? It's a good line. Biden doesn't fit the type in the ill-conceived 1994 crime bill that he shepherded. It did damage his political thing back, his political image back in the 90s, but it may actually help inoculate him against Fat Ass 45's attacks now. Yet despite all this, Biden had to be practically dragged into talking about the protest and has resisted calls to go to Kenosha. Meanwhile, Fat Ass 45 is eagerly seizing on an issue that seems to harm him. Even though each previous round has ended poorly for Fat Ass 45, he keeps doubling and tripling down on exacerbating racial tension. Maybe once he goes big enough, it will work for him, or maybe Fat Ass 45, a man who went bankrupt running a casino, just isn't all that clever as a gambler. Well, he never was clever. He was a fucking dumbass back then, and he still is now. So if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, Ryan Ben White, and also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out, and thanks for listening.